camera right now. All right, so my name is Gabby. I'm the community manager at Grapevine. It's fantastic to be here today with everybody. I am going to pass it over to Emily, who is the founder and CEO of Grapevine. Emily, over to you.
Thank you so much, Gabby, and thank you everyone for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time to learn from this incredible panel we've assembled to learn about philanthropic legacy and how that can begin and potentially continue with your giving circle. So very happy to be here today and to have this session. We're going to jump into that in a minute, but first, because we have some new people here, I do just want to give a quick intro to what this series is all about, what we're trying to do here. So this is a bi-monthly speaker series that features leading thinkers, practitioners, and industry experts. And it's offered to all the giving circles on our platform and beyond. And it is across a broad range of topics. So it's really an opportunity to learn about a broad range of topics in the philanthropic space, how that might intersect with your involvement in the giving circle community, and also just give you a chance to connect with other people in the giving circle community. So to that end, please do continue to say hello in the chat. It's so great to see all of these notes coming in: Seattle, Chicago, El Paso. We have giving circles in every state across the country now. So it's always really fun to see who's in the room, so to speak. We always like to say this is a community-driven movement. So it's nice to see the community here on camera, if you can, and in the chat, letting us know where you're dialing in from. Okay, and so quickly before we jump into this event as well, I do like to just share briefly who we are at Grapevine. I know some of you are newer to Grapevine in the Giving Circle movement, and Grapevine really is a platform that powers giving circles. So we're the only platform dedicated to this Giving Circle movement that provides an online home and also a broader community and programming to support leaders and members of giving circles. So that includes infrastructure tools, training, events like this, and more to really help scale and support the broader Giving Circle movement. We're also now helping to support the launch of lots of new giving circles across the country. So if you've recently been invited into a new group, fantastic, welcome. We have sessions to share more on what to expect with that particular group. So we can share more on those in the chat as well. And you can attend some of our weekly office hours to learn more about those particular giving circles. Okay, so if you want any more information on that, we'll share that in the chat. We'll also send a follow-up email with a number of the resources we'll be sharing here in the chat to everyone who's here. So don't worry if you don't catch it here today. All right, with that, I would like to turn to our incredible speakers and to our topic of the day. So to start us off, I'm going to do a quick intro of each of our speakers, and then we'll get to some of our questions. We'll spend about 30 to 40 minutes in questions with our speakers, and then we'll turn it over to Q&A with all of you. So definitely get your questions ready, and when we get to that point, feel free to drop them in the chat or whatever is comfortable. So today we have Jenny Shaw Spradling with us, the co-founder and co-CEO of FreeWill, the largest provider of estate planning in the US that makes it easy for people to donate to charity. To date, FreeWill has helped generate over $8 billion in commitments to charity. Pretty incredible. Elaine Chu is Vice President, Philanthropic Strategies, Private Donor Group at Fidelity Charitable, which is the nation's largest grant maker. They've distributed $11.2 billion to charities in 2022 alone. Kanwar Singh is a managing director and private wealth advisor at Merrill Private Wealth Management, where he's helped many people and families to plan and build their legacies. And Lori Kranzer is the founder and CEO of Link Elevating Philanthropy, where she supports nonprofits, businesses, and individuals to build out their philanthropic strategies and secure their legacy. Okay, so with all of that, I'm going to kick us off, and I do just want to quickly remind everyone that this is for educational purposes only, so we are not giving financial or legal advice. But this session is titled Philanthropic Legacy Begins with Your Giving Circle, and so to begin, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to answer one easy question. How do you each define legacy and why? So Lori, I'll start with you.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. So I love this question. We have a podcast, Positive Impact Philanthropy, where we ask our guests, how do you define your legacy? And it's actually a difficult question. And it really starts with the why. It starts with the values of the individual, not how they do their gift. So I've been doing this for 22 years, working in plan giving and legacy. And it's really, it's a matter of a personal value and how one connects with the community and how they want to give, whether it's they're giving now or in the future, and lots of different ways that they can give. So it's a very personal gift, and it's usually about how they want to be seen by themselves, their family, and their community after, after they're gone. So that's how we consider legacy.
Thank you, Lori. Pass it over to Jenny.
Very similar, the impact that you leave on the people and the causes around you after you pass.
Conmore.
Similar to Jenny, I think, look, at its most basic, it's what is left from one generation to the next. And I think of Olmsted here in Central Park, planting trees that he knew he would never see. But in the category of the simplest questions can oftentimes be the hardest. I think it gets a lot more involved in that because it can get very personal. And so we'll talk about that as we get.
Great, thank you, Conwar. And Elaine, over to you.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Very similar. The overarching question that we normally ask is, what legacy are you preparing to pass on? We see it as like it's a hope for the future, and it can take many forms. And it really centers on the core values and how it impacts future generations, and how these values provide guidance and inspiration to many family members.
Great. Thank you all. So, I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting to just highlight is that beyond giving, right, and this being a financial piece, there's a much bigger question here, right, around broader impacts and how that aligns with your values. So I'd like to explore that a bit further. And I also just want to note that Chuck Feeney, I believe it's Charles Feeney, who passed away yesterday, but has been a real role model for myself and for a lot of people in the kind of values-aligned living and giving that he's done throughout his life and the legacy that he has built, and I'm sure will continue on for a very long time. He's was actually a billionaire who was behind the duty-free shops. There's a book written about him called The Billionaire Who Wasn't, because he made this commitment to giving away all of his money while living. But anyway, it's a interesting, he's an interesting one to look at as an example of this idea of what is legacy, and thinking about money. Obviously, he had significant money, but also he thought about building a legacy around how he lived his life and how that was aligned with his values. So much further beyond just the financial piece. So Jenny, I'd love to go back to you, and with all of your work at Free Will, I'm curious the kind of trends that you've seen with legacy giving there and what we can learn from them. So pass it back to you.
Yeah, we've learned a lot. Some of the most interesting and maybe surprising things for the folks who are here for the panel today. Charitable giving during estate planning is usually by far and away the largest single charitable gift that someone will make over the course of their lifetimes. In fact, the average gift that we see on Free Will, which is about $70,000, is 3 times the cumulative lifetime giving of an individual. So every gift that is made in that giving circle, at the grocery store, at Christmas, when you pass by someone and drop $1, add that all up, multiply it by 3, that is the average size of a gift that someone gives after they pass away. Which is like kind of astounding, right? It's a huge number. So why aren't we talking about it more? I think the biggest thing is, most folks think, wow, that seems wrong. It's so large. It's being made, that decision, very quickly. But when you start thinking about it, a lot of people have wealth, but it's illiquid wealth. It's bound up in a house that's, say, appreciated over 10, 20, 30 years. And they can't be giving that money away because they're paying for their kids' college and the car debt and all of that sort of thing. But after they pass away, they have a chance to give just, maybe 5 or 10% of that away to a cause that they care about. And we see that consistently on the platform. We've now served almost 900,000 families in doing their estate planning online. And we see again and again folks making these very, very large gifts to charity, even if over their lifetimes they didn't feel particularly wealthy. And it makes a huge impact on the causes that they give to.
Thank you, Jenny. That's incredible. The amount of giving that happens at the very end when you add it all up. What did you say? It was 3 times the cumulative of your lifetime giving. It's incredible. So Elaine, Conmore, Lori, I'd love to hear from each of you. Why is getting clear on your values so important then to beginning this work? And what tips and resources might you have for our people on the call today? If any of those include giving circles, wonderful, but I know there's a much broader universe of resources and tips that you can pull from. So maybe Lori, I'll start with you if you want to kick us off, and I'd love to hear.
Sure. So it's interesting. I work with both sides. I work with individuals and also nonprofits on developing legacy programs or an individual's legacy. And it's really important to focus on those values, like you mentioned, to provide that focus and clarity of what one is supporting in their legacy. And legacy is, it can be done in estate planning. And I see lots of individuals wanting to have a living legacy and do the gift now while they're can see the impact that they're having. So it's lots of different ways that one can do their legacy, but it provides them a way to be consistent, focus, and have a strategy around it. So, it is not responsive giving that one can do to a university or a school they went to. They get something in the mail and send a check in. It really requires a lot of thought, which is why we used to call planned giving, because it required a lot of planning. So this is really why it's important to understand your values, to really understand how one can map out your legacy, because it is the donor's ultimate gift. And many people can give lots of different types of gifts throughout their lifetime to many organizations, depending where they are in their life experience and what's connecting with them at that moment. But for their legacy, and especially if we're considering estate giving in one's will or a trust, you're putting an organization next to your family and friends. And so it really has to have that connection between the donor and that issue area or organization. So that is really why focusing on those values really will help them map out and really set realistic expectations for what they want that impact to be.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, Conwar, did you want to add anything to that?
One thing that Lori said, she referenced strategy. Every client engagement that we have within private wealth starts with a values discovery exercise. And it's an interesting question as to why. I do believe that as we talk about strategy, that hope is not a good strategy. And the corollary to this is legacy without direction is just shooting in the dark. Right. So a compass heading can be really important. What provides that compass heading? What provides that directionality? And it really is, at least from our experience, an understanding of what's important to someone. And you can use terms like values and purpose and mission and impact. They're all sort of surrogates for each other. Underlying this is know yourself and know what really matters to you. And what is the way in which you'd like to see the world potentially improve? There's a lot going on right now over this last weekend that underscores for lots of people on all different sides key issues and values. And the question is, what does it mean to actually care about something to the point where you want to affect that cause and make a difference? And I think the beautiful thing about the giving circles is that it aligns people with a group of others that have a shared sense of those values, and they can see themselves reflected back to themselves. And that sense of community creates a power that's much broader than just any one individual. So I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Conwar. Yeah, we actually help some of our giving circle leaders in thinking about how they can facilitate values discussions with their giving circle members. How can we align our values together? And I think that can be, anyway, a really powerful way to get at what you were just talking about. So Elaine, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, very similar to Conwar's work. We are really rooted in trying to find the family values. And we feel that once you establish those values, that things should kind of relatively fall into place. While there's a particular giving focus and structure, we realize that may change over time, along with different levels of family engagement. But values should be the anchor for any family and how they move forward with their giving approach. And I think we've seen a rise with giving circles and donor collaboratives where families can share very similar values together and give in a very collaborative process.
Thank you, Elaine. And I'm curious, do any of you have other ideas for people of how they can go through that process of identifying their values, especially with their family members? Are there any tools or things that you've seen work well? I know, Conwar, you mentioned there's kind of an intake form that you do in a way, a values discovery exercise. Anything like that, just to give people something a little more tangible as they think about how do I find my values? Hopefully, maybe a giving circle can be part of that, but maybe even beyond that.
So I'll just on that point, I'll reference the fact that when we do this values discovery exercise, it's not a form. It sounds a little hokey, I'm going to be honest, but they're like playing cards. They're called values cards. And we have people go through the deck and flip them over and then eventually try to pare them down, ultimately to 3 or 5, ideally 3 key expressions in a couple of different categories. It could be related to financial matters or family, et cetera. But and we're not unique, Meryl, in having something like this. There are a number of institutions and a number of places that have these. Anything that can be more experiential, and we almost always have in partnered or coupled situations, both partners or both members of the couple do it independently. Because crazy things happen if they try and do it together, including fights. So we always recommend doing it separately and then looking at, oh, okay, that's yours, this is mine. And then if you have children in the mix that are of an appropriate age, have them participate and start to see what does it look like for us to have a collective shared sense of values versus also mine individually or as a couple.
That's great. I think I've seen some of those cards developed by 2164. I know, Elaine, we were talking about them before. Yeah, I'm curious if that's a tool that you've used, Elaine, with others as well.
Yeah, we've used a couple of tools, but the one that we do use often is through 2164. It's called the Picture Your Legacy card. It's a set of image cards that guides individuals and families toward articulating a legacy. And very similar to the values card, right? Because 2164, they do the values card also. It's going through a deck of 52 cards, and then they just sort through these images, and they find the one image that really resonates with them. And then through that image, we use it to draft a mission statement, a vision statement, or a set of family values. Great.
Thank you. Well, it sounds like the cards are a great strategy for finding values. Maybe we should bring these 2 giving circles more, Gabby. I don't know that we have that as part of our current training for the giving circle leaders. So I'm curious, so if we move beyond the cards, let's say, okay, we've done this exercise, we've aligned around our values, and now we really want to turn that into some kind of purpose-aligned strategy, right? Something that we can now execute against, if you will. So I'd love to move into maybe some recommendations and experiences you've had helping people do that. How do you take that values aligned approach to actually building out a plan? So maybe Elaine, maybe I'll just go back to you and then we can proceed with everyone else. But I'm curious if you wanted to share more, because you started talking about the 2164 values cards, but then kind of turning that into a mission statement. So is there more you can share on that process and the next steps?
So some of the sessions that we work with along with families is we go through the Picture Your Legacy card with a 32164, and then after we've identified the either a mission statement or a set of values, we go ahead and move into either the interest area cards, and that is the same process of the values cards. There's the deck of cards. You go through selecting 10, 5, and then 3. And then that really, what we're trying to target there is commonality between family members around interest areas to support. And then on a broader scale, Fidelity Charitable, we just released the primer called Discovering Your Philanthropic Identity. You can download that on our website. It's also a guide to really help you consider your identity as an individual donor around your passions and priorities, and then weaving that in with 2164, and then the Discovering Your Philanthropic Identity primer, coming up with strategic approaches to how you want to plan your giving. So that can include it can include a number of ways, right? A lot of donors look at one-time giving, recurring gifts, and also looking at a 5-year to 10-year plan in terms of how they want to provide significant impacts to the community.
Great, thank you, Elaine. Kanwar, do you want to continue? Do you have other tips for people on how to translate those values into real world strategies to execute around them? Oh, did we lose Kanwar for a moment? We may have. Jenny, I'll turn it over to you and hopefully he'll join back in a moment.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, the short answer is it's hard. Like, it's hard for everyone. It's hard if you have a lot of money and get to sit with a Lori or a Kanwar or an Elaine. It is hard if you don't have as many resources and you're trying to do research and figure this out on your own. Many big foundations and organizations have tried to pour a lot of money into helping folks with this, but it's okay if it feels hard, is the first thing to say. In terms of what we do at Free Will, when folks make estate plans on Free Will and they go to the charitable section, we do a couple different things that help them find a cause that might match up with their values. The first thing is we will sort out kind of local, regional, national, international kind of causes. Many folks, we've done thousands of users interviews at this point, feel more aligned to one of those types of giving. So that oftentimes helps filter down the 1.5 million nonprofits that exist in the US alone. Another lens that many folks come at is, I can tie my particular value, let's say it's in, growth, to a cause area like education. Then from there, we will try and again, filter down nonprofits to credible, highly rated on GiveStar and all of those resources that you all probably are well acquainted with, individual causes that are along those lines. And also you can cross those two dimensions, right? So the geographic reach, how local is this to you, plus the cause area. Those are two lenses that seem to help people. Beyond that, what I would say is interesting from what we've seen is we will randomize these things and try and create as few options as possible, meaning we just surface 8 options to the individual user. And we actually find that most people prefer picking from a limited set of options, like just 8, than they do looking at all of those different categories that each list call it between 8 to 10 causes between them. That was surprising to us. More than half of our users actually just go off of that randomized suggested tab, which is just some subset of those, because it is easier for them from a decision fatigue standpoint to make the decision off of that than a bigger amount. All of this is to say these are patterns that we've noticed that might help you and your giving circles figure out what you want to do. But each person has a different approach.
It's fascinating. Thank you, Jenny, for sharing. And I think points to like the importance of getting really clear on your values and spending more time finding these causes and things that you care about before getting to that decision point, right? Of selecting the organization. Lori, I'll turn it over to you. I'm curious to hear your experience here and what you would recommend.
Yeah, similar to Elaine and Jenny, I'm also a 2164 certified advisor. The tools are fantastic, but you don't need them to understand what your values are and to go through the process. Like Jenny was saying, it can be a little overwhelming, but one can do it. So if you're not working with an advisor, I suggest people to go through a value exercise for themselves, identify issue areas. I would say most people that go through this process have already been giving somewhere. So what I do also with clients, we look where they've given before and why. And is there a trend there? Do they want to further their giving in a particular area? They saw an impact and they want to continue. There's a lot of things that we can do with that to also identify issue areas. And one thing also I would say, as you're thinking about issue areas, also think about what in the issue area do you want to do? So, if you're interested in supporting foster care, does that look like supporting a program, local or global? Is it policy change? There are so many things that are factors in that, so you can really explore that to see what kind of impact you want to make when you find that issue area you're interested in. And I always suggest, I do it also for clients, but you can do it on your own, is to talk with the organizations. Everyone will be happy to chat with you about what they're doing. Call them up, benchmark the organizations that you're interested in supporting, compare them, do your due diligence, and you'll be able to narrow down your choices. Like Jenny said, you really should narrow down to what you're considering and then select from there. It makes the process a little bit easier.
Love that. Thank you, Lori. And I love that the kind of inverse, right? Instead of trying to figure out your values first, maybe look at what you've already been supporting and see if that can help surface for you some values. Like, why are you supporting these things? And help you identify in kind of a reverse format there a little bit. Well, thank you all for sharing. And I think this is one area too where we often look to giving circles, as we've talked about, as a great way to just explore, right? To just discover. So before you're actually looking at a list of things, to Jenny's point, there can be a decision fatigue because the list is long, right? 1.3, 1.5 million nonprofits. So if you're starting from there, it can feel quite overwhelming. But we do often see giving circles being a great way for people just over time to be exposed to a broader range of causes and organizations through the recommendations of other members and the ability to support and interact with a broad range of organizations. So I think that can be a really nice opportunity for people who are looking to explore a bit more here and get more clear on the causes and types of organizations they'd like to support. So beyond identifying the values and the corresponding causes and organizations, assuming all of that is then in place, how can people feel like they're being smart about the financial strategies that they're pursuing to really have the maximum impact for the causes and nonprofits that they care about? I mentioned earlier Chuck Feeney, his whole approach was giving while living, right? While others think more about how do I set up a structure that lives beyond me and can continue to give? How can I engage a broader range of people through a giving circle or my family to carry on some of these values beyond me as well? So I'm just curious what kind of structures, what kind of financial strategies you would recommend to people, or just ideas for them to explore. So maybe, Jenny, I'll start with you if that's okay, and then we can go around.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. And I will disclaim, our users tend to be more kind of like mass affluent, everyday givers. And so I can mainly speak to what is simplest and easiest for many of them. The two tools that we see the most frequently is a gift that is made through a will and a trust, or a trust. The type of gift is usually a residual gift. So it's like a percentage of their total assets. The reason for that is because if you do a fixed dollar amount, you may not know how many assets you have at the end of the day. And so maybe you've given way too much to the cause and your family members or other people who might want to give to might not have enough, or vice versa. It might be way smaller than your overall intention. So that's what we usually see. Outside of that, in terms of real-time giving, I think as people are accumulating wealth and realizing, wow, I do have money to give, just like Chuck Feeney, maybe I want to give some of this away while I'm alive. We see gifts of appreciated assets as being a pretty smart way to give, as opposed to just cash. What I mean by appreciated assets, which is a fancy word for like stock that is worth more now than when you bought it, or crypto, or whatever else. And the reasons for that are twofold. One, you don't have to pay capital gains taxes on any of that appreciation. And two, you get to write off the whole amount. So there is a double tax benefit to doing these types of appreciated asset gifts. And you don't need necessarily a financial advisor or anything like that to help you execute that. There are tools online that you can do that through, and oftentimes brokerages will make that easy for you as well. So a couple tactical tips.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jenny. And thank you for calling out the different tools for different, especially in this bucket, right? What are the financial strategies and tools? It can really make a difference, the amount of money that you have or the types of assets that you have that you're thinking about deploying here. So a lot of our Giving Circle members are in that mass affluent, mass market bucket. So that's super helpful. Let's see, Lori, maybe I'll turn it over to you and you take it from there.
Sure. So in addition to the tools that one can use, and in addition to adding a gift to your will or your trust, you can use retirement assets. So if one has had 401k and IRA, that's a great vehicle to use to do a legacy gift. You do not need an attorney for that. It takes about 15 minutes. I can probably change all of mine within the remainder of time that we have right here. If I wanted to add some charitable bequests in those, really simple to do online. And it's also a tax-wise gift to do. But I would say if you really want to get your family involved and make that impact, that the gift vehicles that I love to do that would be an endowment, because that's a gift that goes in perpetuity, and you could set it up. It's a naming opportunity. It could be in honor of someone, and you're having an impact on a particular cause or program that you really care about. And so that's a great vehicle. But also, if one has the assets, one can do a family foundation, or I prefer doing a DAF because it really suits the same purpose. You can put assets, depending on where you place it. I'm sure Elaine has more to talk about that, but you can put it somewhere and then be able to give and direct or recommend grants to whatever organizations that you want going in the future. And many of the DAFs also have a capability for successors. So you are leaving a legacy in that sense to your community and your family. So that's a really great gift to consider as well.
Great. Thank you, Lori. Well, I think that's a perfect pass off to Elaine on the DAF topic.
Lori. Yeah, in addition to what Lori and Jenny said, donor advised funds are one of the fastest growing and increasingly popular ways to give because it's easy to set up, very low admin fees, and provide tax benefits to the donor. I think depending on where your wealth is, we do see a lot of restricted stock because once you donate directly into the DAF, generally you can take an income tax deduction for the fair market value of the stock, and then potentially eliminate capital gains tax as well. And with the DAF, we've been seeing more and more family foundations sunset their foundation and then move over to the DAF model. In fact, as an example, I had a family that I worked with. They had a family foundation for the last 20 to 30 years. And they said, initially when we opened the family foundation, we had thought about creating programs and hiring staff, but all we really do is just grant money out to organizations that we value and we care about. And the DAF model is the way to do it because they don't have to hire staff to do that. We can go ahead and provide the structure to be able to provide impactful grant making for them.
Great. Thank you, Elaine. And yeah, I think for anyone who isn't familiar, donor advised fund, it's like a charitable savings account, right? You can donate into it, you get that immediate tax deduction. And then just like if you had a foundation, you would then grant money out from that account over time. That's what you would do with your DAF account. We often actually talk about giving circles, the model that we have, almost like a community DAF, right? You're pooling your money with other people into an account, a charitable account, you get that tax deduction. And then as a group, you're deciding where to grant that money out over time together. So we actually have a number of families that set up giving circles as well, kind of in that similar spirit, pooling money and collaborating to decide where to give collectively over time. Kanwar, I see you're back. Welcome back. I'd love to turn it over to you. We were just talking about financial strategies and
apologies, tech issues. My computer decided to reboot.
Oh, no.
Perfect timing, right? It's interesting. There's all sorts of structural things that the smart people on this call have talked about, Lori, Jenny, Elaine. I think one of the things that isn't talked about that I believe warrants more conversation is also if, for instance, I've got a giving circle or a donor advice fund or a foundation who says we care about the welfare of children, because the assets that are put into these vehicles themselves get invested in a variety of ways, are we clear that the way we're investing is in alignment with that? Because impact goes well beyond just simply, I'm giving money to this cause. It's often important how we get there, right? Do we walk the talk? And there has been a perception in the industry for a long time that, I will sacrifice something if I choose to honor my values in the way I invest, right? So if I'm going to say I care about the welfare of children, I have to accept a lesser return. And the reality is there's all sorts of strategies now, what are called index replicating strategies, where I can screen out stocks of offending companies and still track the performance of the market. It sounds like too good to be true, but it's actually statistically possible. And I won't get into the details unless someone really wants to know. But the point being that there's a way to now achieve the performance of the market and say, you know what, I don't believe in unconventional warfare and arms. I don't believe in child labor or for-profit prisons. And there's a whole variety of things you can imagine, and therefore I can screen that out. that's a little bit outside of the frame of the traditional structuring conversation that Lori and Jenny and Elaine were talking about. But I think it's equally important because it's also the how of what we're doing, and whether that reflects, again, an alignment with what we say we care about. And the more you can get in alignment, by the way, the more I find it also really engenders a lot of participation for the next generation. Because, our experience has been that Gen Z and millennials are like, yeah, this is all great, our Found Family Foundation or our donor advised fund, but you don't show or reflect the values that I care about. And is it okay that right now we're participating in stocks that maybe, emit 150 metric tons of carbon for every $1 million in revenues, right? There's different ways of measuring all of this. And as you can see, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I make that a priority with every client to have a conversation about, are we aware of what our portfolio really contains? And it's cool. I don't have an axe to grind. Whatever you want is great. But if you say you care about something, did you know there's a way to also align how you get to your end result with those same values? I'll stop. Otherwise, I feel too soapboxy.
That's great. Thank you, Kanwar, for bringing that into the conversation. I don't know, Lori, Elaine, Jenny, if any of you have thoughts on the impact investing side.
Absolutely agree. I thank you, Kanwar, for bringing it up. There's lots of different ways that one can give micro lending, lots of different interesting financial tools that one can also show your values through your investing. And it's really important also, as you're considering organizations to support, take a look at how they are invested, not only for your own investments. So I know that a lot of nonprofits I work with, we also focus their investing to be very transparent and also reflect their values and their mission. So when you're considering those nonprofits or those issue areas, take a look at their finances. Also, you can look at them and you can see how they're invested and make sure they are aligned with their mission too. So it's a great point. Thanks, Kanwar.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. It's funny, I actually had a meeting yesterday with Common Fund, which does a lot of advising to nonprofits on how to align their investment strategies with their values and their missions as well. So some really nice support for organizations too who might be looking for more guidance on that part of it. Okay, wonderful. Well, I'd like to continue. And, one thing that came up a little bit earlier, but I wonder if anyone has anything to add. This idea of your financial resources, you only have so much as you're thinking about what you're going to leave and where you're going to direct these funds between different causes and nonprofits, and maybe also the people in your life that you care about. I'm wondering if any of our panelists have anything to share on just that piece of this, how to think about your broader legacy and leaving funding for those that you care about, as well as for those causes and organizations you care about. Any tips or resources for anyone on this topic?
So very often, I would say in almost every case, we use a variety of financial planning tools to help arrive at the answer to some of these questions, okay? And there's a quantitative answer that you can give. I find that the qualitative, which is kind of where we started the whole conversation with this discussion of values, overrides everything. I mean, there is the part about, I need to know how much I need to sustain my lifestyle over time. So for lifetime giving, if it's during my lifetime, I need to make sure I'm not giving away more than I need to actually sustain my lifestyle. But there's a real question each family has to decide for themselves, each individual, do I want to set aside X amount, any given amount for my heirs, if I have them? Do I want to give to charity? There's a tax benefit that we can quantify and run models that say, oh, this is how you're going to reduce your taxes, and this is the net benefit in terms of transferring wealth to heirs if you give charitably. But, the question goes beyond just simply what's going to be the tax outcome. It's also what's really important. I know that there's rules of thumb that could exist out there in terms of percentages. I don't know that they're always the most helpful, only because it's usually reverting back to that lowest common denominator, okay? And ultimately, what should always control during your lifetime is what works for you from a financial plan perspective during your lifetime. I would defer to Jenny and Lori and Elaine as it relates to testamentary gifts or gifts at your death. That would be legacy gifts from a planned gift perspective in terms of what they advise in that regard. But certainly everything we do is centered around using some kind of planning tool or software, and there's plenty out there, and happy to share resources with people later if they're interested.
Great, Conrad, thank you. Yeah, we'll make sure to get some of those resources from you so we can share those in our follow-up email as well. I think some of the rules of thumb are just average percentages you talked about. It looks like 5 to 10% of total estate is typically left to causes. This is according to, I think, some of the numbers that some of us have seen on our platforms or in our communities, and then the rest to loved ones. Obviously that varies widely, to Conwar's point, but it's just kind of an interesting thing for people to note. I imagine that might change quite a bit too if you have your own nonprofit. That's actually a question that came up in preparation for this event. Some people are wondering, if you have your own organization, how might that change things? So I'd like to just move on to one quick question around common misconceptions. So is there anything that we want to share with the community today about what are the biggest challenges that donors face with building their legacy, and what are the common misconceptions? So Jenny, maybe I'll start it off with you this time.
Yeah, a couple things just on the estate planning side. The first one is that estate planning is only for the uber wealthy. People with literal estates, people imagine like hedges and gardens and mazes when they think estate planning. That is not true. Estate planning is for everyone. If you have a minor child who needs a guardian, it would be good to get a will in place, down to those basics. Second misconception is that estate planning has to be expensive and hard. It can be expensive and hard. We've heard that from some user interviews, but it doesn't have to be. And depending on your means and the level of complexity in your situation, there are different types of estate planning solutions for you. We 100% encourage people who have multiple businesses and assets in different states and jurisdictions to go to see an estate planning lawyer. Pay the money, get it done right. If you have a kid with disabilities, go to see a lawyer. However, if you have a pretty basic situation, you're married with some minor children, you've never been married before, you have a primary house and some money in a brokerage account, use something like FreeWill or LegalZoom or something online and just get something in place now, because the worst case scenario is not having anything in place at all. And what we see time and time again with, at this point, almost 900,000 families, including a bunch that are in the 1 to 10 million, asset range, they're using FreeWill as a stopgap in order to get something in place. And that's fantastic. That's what we want.
Great. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, it's your first step, maybe not your last, but it could be a great first step. Thank you, Jenny. Elaine, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think that sometimes I get the feeling that certain individuals view that this is just, it's very easy, relatively easy to think about your philanthropic legacy, when in fact is not. We aim to work really hard. We work really hard with families to identify successors, and most of them are the children. But but sometimes the misconception is that, oh, well, I'm working on this philanthropic plan right now, so it should be relatively easy to move it over to my children when it's time. But that's where we need to engage the next generation and the children earlier than later, because in that way they're prepared to think about how to honor their parents' legacy and also start to form their own.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Elaine. Yeah, the next generation. Lori, Conwar, anything to add? Misconceptions?
I would agree with Elaine and Jenny. Many people are concerned about thinking about drafting the will. It seems because talking about death and taxes is always, an area that they don't want to talk about. But a misconception is those in that demographic, and we're talking 70s and 80s and up, are comfortable talking about what's meaningful in their life and to talk about what they want to do. And many of them would have their will at that point in time. I see a lot of younger individuals not creating that estate plan. So something like using FreeWill or something online would be a good option for them. That it's not very, it's not expensive to use. And estate planning really is not that expensive unless you have a very complex estate. But one of the things also that I see is that People think it's a simple process, and it really does need a lot of thought that goes into it, besides who you want to include in your estate planning as terms of family, friends, causes. But you need to also speak with all your advisors on it, and not just do something as, just trying to get that gift in. You really need to connect with who you're working with, whether it's an accountant, you're a lawyer, financial advisor. Do have a lot of thought that should go into your estate planning. So it's not just that decision, this is how I'm going to do it. So it does require a little more thought than just, adding an organization to a will. And there's also other ways to do estate planning outside of a will as well. So as much as I really hope that everyone has a will, there are other great vehicles to do estate planning as well. And people should consider those, including life insurance and all those other gift vehicles.
Lori. Conmar, anything to add?
Everyone said all the really smart stuff. I'll share something that's maybe a little bit off the beaten path, which is maybe it's more of a word of caution than it is a misconception, which is everyone deserves the right to be the hero of their own story, to steal from Joseph Kemp. And the problem that I see oftentimes is that people who fund donor advised funds or family foundations and the like, oftentimes the wealth creators, the people who are funding it, seek to not only become the hero of their own story, but the hero of everyone else's story, including the nonprofit's story. And there's a phrase that a mentor of mine uses in this industry, who says, you can't live in the plan when it's created that way. And so my advice is to think really carefully about how things could be structured in terms of how you're funding gifts, or even how you're setting up plans, to Elaine and Lori's points, and Elaine's about, the group's points about the estate plan that you set up. Make sure that there's the capacity for each member of the family, or even the nonprofits that are benefiting, to become the heroes of their stories. Otherwise, I think you kind of compromise what it is to really achieve that legacy. That's a bit of an editorial, so I'm going to be a little bit choosier about that.
No, it's a compelling point to end on. I like that very much. Well, we are already at 3:48 here, so I would love to turn it over to questions from the audience now. If anyone has questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. You can share them that way. Gabby, I'm not sure if you have any questions that people shared in advance that you want to tee up for us in the meantime.
Yeah, as Emily said, feel free to raise your hand or unmute or drop it in the chat and I will read it out. We asked people before the event if they had any questions. So I will start with asking if you have any tips you've talked about having these conversations within your family and that kind of thing, but what about talking about giving values with your giving circle? Do you have any thoughts around how people can approach that with a group?
Anyone want to take that one?
Well, I think I'll just jump in. It depends on the giving circle, and depends on the issue area. There, some of them I know supports specific areas. So I would say having a conversation, you can do. It depends on the giving circle, really. You could have someone facilitate the conversation. There are really great resources at Philanthropy Together, Amplify Giving. They have all these ways to facilitate those conversations, and I think that's a really good way to start that.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, and I almost think the family values line conversation starters, right? The 2164 materials and some of those that help facilitate those conversations for families could be just as applicable to the giving circles, just where you're trying to, as you were sharing earlier, Elaine, I think identifying your individual values and then finding the overlap for those values. We'll make sure to share some of those resources too. Conmar, did you unmute? Did you want to share anything?
No, I think that's exactly on point. So I'll let you keep going because I know there's more questions.
Awesome. Yeah, and as everyone has said, I will share all these resources in a follow-up in case you didn't catch all of them. We have a question around if the way they think about giving and around legacy, if in your experience, if you've seen any change in that post-pandemic, the way people are approaching that. I'll throw it out to everyone here.
Well, I guess the one thing I have seen since the pandemic is the ones that the families that did not have successors listed on their DAF, they quickly moved on that. Um, and it had a lot to do, either they had a loved one that was sick, or they knew a loved one that had passed away, and it got them really thinking about, well, how do I actually start to involve my children? Because we are giving rapidly and we're giving differently than how we were before. Um, and how do we incorporate the children now into our decision-making process?
That's great. Thank you, Elaine. I'm curious, like beyond adding them as successors, are you seeing anything else about how people are incorporating the children more?
They are more, what I've seen is they are more involved in a lot of donor collaboratives, actually joining together as a family. And I think that that's wonderful to see, because it shows that they have a set of shared values, or at least interest in the areas that they want to support.
Interesting. Well, it definitely aligns with the collaborative giving space that we're all operating in. So we're big fans of that approach. Any other thoughts, Kanwar, Lori?
I mean, I have seen, I think, a greater willingness and interest in distributed giving, right? So this collaborative giving. I think that because of what happened with, I mean, now it seems impossible to believe there was ever a time where we did spend all this time with people on Zoom, right? But it was pretty unknown until 2020. And that has opened up the door to a lot of collaborative spaces. And I see that not just in giving, but across the board. And the conversations that are happening, even among families that might be distributed, where they're getting together and taking action. I think, people are more willing and able to do that, in a facilitated way with these platforms. And I think Grapevine is in exactly the right place right now to help facilitate that. And I think the power of that collaborative giving, I think people underestimate the power of a small gift, but when combined together, it has significant impact and gets the attention of a lot of nonprofits now. So I think it's a perfect time for it.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the plug there as well. Yeah. Oh, Jenny, I see you have your hand up. Maybe we'll go to you, and we can hear your question live.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you. This panel is wonderful. Piggybacking on that, first of all, shout out to Giving Circles and Emily and everything you're doing, because I think there's a lot of us out here, and the people I work with, I'm in the nonprofit space, but a lot of people who have very little resource, and yet their values are still generosity and impact and legacy. And yet they have so little to give, but those values have never changed, and they haven't just as much as someone with the millions and the trillions. And so I find the Giving Circles this amazing outlet of multiplying your impact. So my question for the panel is, as we think about legacy for those people with a lot less in their hands, what tools have you seen, or what recommendations would you give to them that could still multiply their impact and leave more than just the dollar for dollar that they would leave, the $100 to their favorite nonprofit? Are there tools? Is there like the basics you would recommend to them that would say this would multiply your gifts somehow, especially for people starting out?
Thank you, Jenny. Well, I mean, one thing I want to pass it to Jenny, the other Jenny Shaw Spradling, since so much of her work is focused on communities, that aren't in the higher net worth brackets, and helping them to amplify their impact. But I will also just note that I think the Giving Circle model can certainly do that even beyond one's life. I mean, we've even seen things like legacy circles on the Grapevine platform, where when someone passes, their friends and family will come together and put together a giving circle or a legacy circle in order to give back on a recurring basis annually in honor of the things that they cared about, or the communities that they cared about. And so in that way, they're making donations and actually often coming together in person, in many cases, or virtually every year, to honor that person, remember them, recognize them, and make a gift to something that they care about, and in that way build their legacy through that model. So one thing I've seen on our side that's been really exciting. But Jenny, I'll turn it over to you.
First, Jenny, it sounds like you're from the nonprofit sector, which we love. And there's a million things we could talk about increasing kind of annual dollar donation coming in. But I would say if the advice is for the average donor who's trying to make sure that they are getting as much as possible from their dollar, a couple of thoughts. One, as we previously talked about, that estate planning as being a mechanism to get a fairly large gift when you have illiquid wealth. Two, corporate matching. I think oftentimes folks aren't aware of corporate matching programs that allow them to multiply their giving. And then the third one, in terms of multiplying giving, very nonprofit dependent, but oftentimes you'll see kind of large major donors who are willing to match donations as well. And sometimes there'll be 1x, 2x, 3x campaigns. Those are particularly effective times to give. Oftentimes they're during the holiday season. And it makes sense that the major donor wants to see that. They want to see their impact multiply. They want to see the community involved and also giving as well. So there's kind of a symbiotic relationship there. But those are a couple ideas that I have off the top of my head.
I would also, I agree with everything Jenny said, and also recommend looking at community foundations. There's a community foundation in every city around the country, and they also can help people establish funds, which can be community funds where other people or many people can join in to support whatever purpose that they're setting up the fund, so they can do that way.
I also want to add that at least in the donor advised fund space, we see a lot of matches within families, right? Especially over the holidays. Especially, you know, for example, grandma and grandpa, they have a donor advised fund. They want to encourage the grandchildren to give. They will do a match, and then the parents will do another match. So it ends up being a triple match. Then that way, you know, there's not only showing the kids the legacy of giving, but also increasing dollars to nonprofits.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Elaine. I love the matching within families. I think often we think about going external, you know, to other donors, but that's such a great idea. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. We're just at a couple of minutes left, so I do want to wrap up here, but I really want to thank all of our panelists, Lori, Elaine, Jenny, Kanwar, for joining us, for sharing all of your insights and helpful tips. I think we're all much better prepared now to build a meaningful and hopefully lasting legacy, and have some great ideas on how giving circles can also maybe play into some of that. So, you know, it can be a valuable tool in helping to identify and clarify some of your values, discover organizations aligned with those values, and may even be a useful way to think about continuing your legacy beyond your time here through you know, influencing and others who may also then continue that legacy to give in that way, whether it's community members in your giving circle or family members, whatever it may be. So I think giving circles are a compelling part, but only one part. As you've heard today from all of our panelists, there are so many great tools and resources to help you think about this. We will make sure we compile those for you and send that